I'd say hello, Grace, but I'm afraid that look on your face might be catching.
What is this place?
It's a garden, darling. Surely even mortals have them.
This building. All those people I pass getting up here. Are they all idols?
Oh, at least some of them. Welcome to Olympus, dear Grace. Our home hidden away in plain sight. Marvelous, isn't it?
How many idols are there? I've met, less than 12?
Oh, I don't know, 20, 30. Our numbers have dwindled so much I've stopped keeping track.
I didn't know there were that many gods.
We're not all equally legendary, it's true. Some idols were barely worshipped, others not at all. Indeed, not all of us are idols. Some are merely immortal. Hangers-on, if you will. You'll meet them all, given time.
Idols live here? I mean, Calliope didn't, obviously. Apollo doesn't either.
One must have special dispensation from Our Lady of Wisdom, Athena, before they can take up a private dung heap like Apollo's.
Am I gonna have to give him my apartment?
That's rather putting the cart before the horse, darling. First, you must outlive the week.
Right. Good point. I've passed this part of the city 100 times. I've never seen this building. Was it always here, or...?
Our Lady Hecate provides glamours that allow certain things to go unseen, such as my glorious horns. Olympus is the same. Those invited see it. Those who aren't see exactly what they expect. It's not anywhere as grand as in the old country, but it serves its purpose.
I don't know, Pan. Olympus seems pretty grand to me.
As if mortals would know any better. This isn't the first time you've been here. I'm sure Hermes took you to Athena's dreary office.
That's here? Huh.
Good one, that Hermes. Almost as dull-witted as the original, but biddable.
You asked me to meet you here?
I did. As I recall, you owe me a favor that I now wish to collect, if you'd be so kind.
Figured as much. Apollo was right about you.
Dear, sweet, suspicious Apollo. Boring Apollo. What have I ever done to you? Here's the thing. A friend has begged for my help, and you're far better suited than I to offer what he requires. I'll give you a key to reach the reliquary where he resides. You help him, and then we're even. If that's not enough incentive, the reliquary is also where you'll find the lovely Hecate. A sorceress of her power could aid your quest. What do you say?
This Hecate, do you think she could help me?
If she's of a mind. She is the goddess of dark magic, the creator of all our marvelous glamours. If anyone can help you, it is she.
And if she's not of a mind?
Then she won't help you. Grace, that part is up to you. I can't be expected to do everything, can I?
What is this reliquary? Doesn't that have something to do with the bones of saints or something?
Not those relics. Our relics. The relics of ancient gods. Magical treasures collected over thousands of years. Books, mainly. We store them in a faraway place so no one unsavory can get their hands on them.
Unsavory like you?
Unsavory like most. Athena has decreed that these relics are not to be used by any save Hecate and herself. A rather dull waste of so much amassed knowledge and power, but who am I to judge? I'm not leader of the chorus.
This person I'm to help, what does he want? And why can't you do it?
Well, Grace, there are some things you're better equipped to handle than I. This, as I understand it, is a delicate matter of the heart. One that requires a muse's hand.
A matter of the heart.
What, did you think I was sending you to rough someone up? Set something aflame? Don't be absurd. The man has an issue with his love life. Even if you can't help him, I'll treat the effort as worth the favor.
If these relics are off limits, does that mean they're dangerous?
Some, but I'm not asking you to chase after any of that nonsense. In fact, I'd advise against it.
But what if one of those relics could help me?
My, such an adventurer you are. It's possible, but ask Hecate first. She, and I mean this with complete and uncharacteristic seriousness, is not an idol you or anyone wishes to cross.
So that's it? Fix up someone's love life? Nothing trickier than that?
Oh, the way you talk, Grace. It makes me blush.
Well, it's just that...
I trade in willing favors, Grace. If I didn't, no one would want to do as I ask, and then where would I be? I may seem untrustworthy, but allow me to reassure you. If I wish you harm, you will walk into that harm knowingly, and with open arms.
You're saying you can talk me into anything?
Anything you would enter into willingly and with eyes wide open, which covers a great deal. Yes.
That's surprisingly ethical of you, Pam.
I find consent wildly attractive, Grace.
I'll think about it, but no promises.
Marvelous. The gentleman you seek is named Asterion. Lovely fellow, quite harmless. Now, if there's nothing else you need.
What, no offer to dance this time?
Would you, if I asked?
I wouldn't say no to a bit of fun.
A marvelous attitude. You'll go far with that. Now, if there's nothing else you need.
That depends. What can you tell me about Medusa?
That is a rather peculiar subject change.
Her name came up at Aphrodite's party. I'd like to look into it.
You'll find Medusa at a dingy little club appropriately named the Viper's Nest. Give her my regards. Do tell me you'll be careful if you go there, Grace. Medusa is a hideous creature and should be treated as such.
I'd swear that was you being concerned for my welfare.
Somebody should be, don't you think?
I can handle myself.
I do love this about you. So capable, so heedless. I'll send a package to your domicile that contains directions and the key you'll need to reach the reliquary.
I said no promises.
Well, if you decide to go, Grace, you'll still need all those things. Say hello to darling Hecate on my behalf, will you?
Hey, so what's the news, Miss Muse?
Miss Muse.
Well, does a muse have a proper form of address? I just want to hear what exciting adventures you've been having.
Well, I went to a party held by the goddess of love, and she died.
Man, I always miss the really good parties. Here I was, sitting at home, just reading a book. Everything else okay, though? Do we know who the killer is yet?
Not just yet, no.
Okay, well, let me know if there's anything I can do. If I have to hustle to become your high priestess, well, so be it.
Exactly how much do you know about the Greek gods, Freddy?
I know my Greek mythology, but what I've read clearly doesn't line up with who they are today. Or who they ever were, maybe.
Still might be useful. There's gotta be some truth to those stories, right?
Maybe? Who do you want to hear about?
Do you know anything about the Muses? Or Calliope in particular?
Yeah, for starters, there were supposed to be 9, though I guess there are some sources that said there were only 4, maybe 3. Each of the muses had her specialty. Did you know that Calliope is supposed to be the muse of epic poetry? She inspired the Odyssey.
Wow. I don't even like poetry.
Yeah, it was said her singing voice was unmatched. So they got that part right, at least.
Did she also lead the ancient Greeks in giant choreographed dance numbers?
No, but she once turned a bunch of snobby princesses into magpies, so there's that.
Just how many of these gods are there? From what I've heard, lots of idols live around here.
Well, there are tons of minor gods in Greek mythology, hundreds even, depending on how you define them. Oddly, there's never any mention of the word idols in relation to them. Maybe it's like how people worshipped idols?
I sort of assumed it was related to the eidolon.
Which is a Greek word, but I think it means ghost. An image of someone after they die.
Makes sense.
Me? I'm more amazed at all the big names missing. Not just Zeus and Hades, most of the Olympians seem to be gone. Makes you think about what's been lost, but also what might still be out there.
What about Apollo?
Okay, so the prophecy stuff checks out. Apollo was god of the sun and light, but also kind of enlightenment in general. He's always talked about as this beautiful and cultured god involved with the arts and the muses, kind of a Renaissance man before the Renaissance.
He's clearly had a rough time since those days.
Well, he was also a giant horn dog, Grace. I can list off like a dozen men and women Apollo has had as lovers, and there's probably more.
Weren't they all like that, though?
I mean, Apollo's no Zeus. He never assaulted anyone as a swan. And no, they aren't all like that. Our sun god had a reputation.
Tell me what you know about Persephone.
Honestly, she's the least like her stories. Usually, she's either a victim or just the wife of Hades, or both.
And that's it? She was kidnapped by Hades, end of story?
Pretty much. Her mother was so angry she created winter. But otherwise, Persephone was just your average sweet and virginal fertility goddess.
You're right, that doesn't sound like her at all.
Must be hard to be defined by this one thing that happened to you thousands of years ago. I'd be pissed if everyone thought my story ended there.
Well, she is pretty pissed. That much is true. You said Pan was some kind of lust god, right?
Yeah, kind of. Pan's a god of the wild, and I guess that translates into a sort of lustfulness and earthiness, humping nymphs in the forest sort of thing.
And you don't like him.
Honestly, he's exactly what I'd expect him to be. All the stories say he's a lech and a beast. The Christians equated him with the devil. Weirdly, he's also the only god who's supposed to have died, though it's never really clear how or why. Anyhow, there's a great statue depicting Pan having sex with a goat. Next time you see him, you gotta ask him about it.
What about Athena? Is she really supposed to be the goddess of wisdom?
Sure, but mostly that's meant as tactical knowledge. Athena wasn't all sweetness and light. She was a warrior goddess. She was also the goddess of heroes. There are loads of stories where Athena helps guys like Odysseus or Jason or Perseus.
No female heroes back in those days?
Yeah, I guess not. Women were the weaker sex, which maybe is why Athena was portrayed as being vindictive. She cursed Medusa, one of her own priestesses. She turned people into spiders, struck them blind, started the Trojan War. It's the whole thing.
Not being as wise as advertised is on brand for her, then. Do you think there might be other gods out there?
Well, there are all those gods the idols say wandered off. We don't know they're dead for sure, right? They could be living it up in Australia. Who would know? Then there are all the other mythologies, hundreds of cultures, each with their own pantheon. So what's so special about the Greeks? That only their gods are real, right? All those other pantheons could be living in secrecy, just like the idols. And that means they're hidden from each other, too. Oh, they could be everywhere and no one would know.
It's like a whole other secret side to the world.
Yeah, it's cool, right? I hope I get to meet Ganesha one day. Or maybe Lakshmi?
I wonder how much of those stories are true.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I'm giving you the quick version. There are reams of textbooks out there covering all this, but even they rarely agree with each other.
Really? Nothing definitive?
Ancient Greece was 3,000 years ago, Grace. Not much information survived all that time, if it was even valid to begin with.
You know what I find weird? That the idols have managed to remain completely secret all these years. Sure, they have magic and whatnot, but in all this time, nobody's found them out? Athena is that good?
Who says nobody has found them out? The way I see it, it's like UFOs.
Okay, I have to hear this.
Okay, so you could have real evidence that UFOs exist and that governments have covered it up and people still wouldn't believe it. Why? Because they'd get laughed at if they admitted it. Imagine the headline, Greek gods exist and are living among us. What website would even run that?
Weird conspiracy ones. Yeah, you're right. What are Kaz and Brian up to? You didn't tell them anything, did you?
No, I told them you came home, that you're okay, but that you're having a moment. They send their love.
Should we tell them, do you think?
What for? They have their own problems. Plus, Brian can't keep a secret to save his life, and Kaz is officially homeless.
Is he still crashing on Brian's couch?
Grace, you do know that Brian doesn't have a couch, right? Just some giant beanbag things?
Then where is Kaz Oh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's cute. They'll tell us when they're ready. But right now, it's best just to not mix them up in this.
I should really apologize about the band. This kind of puts a dent in your plans, doesn't it?
You're right, Grace. How dare you sabotage my dreams? I am so mad I could spit.
You know what I mean. Nobody could have seen this coming, sure, but it's always been something with me.
Well, as I see it, there are two ways this goes down. One, neither of us gets back to the band. It was just a thing we did for a while before I founded a cult in your name. Or two, we get back to it and the band now has The Muse as its lead singer. Edge of Elysium becomes the coolest and most appropriate band name ever.
Ugh, I still really hate that name.
Look, Grace, you can't be the source of all the drama and name the band, okay? That's the rule.
Okay, that's enough questions for now.
You sure? I can talk all day. You know I can.
I'll check back with you soon, Freddy. Time for more mystery solving.
Hello again. I can't remember the last time I had guests so frequently. I did tell you we could discuss your memories and the Eidolon more in depth after the party. Did you have any questions, or?
When all these memories start to return, will I feel different?
Well, let's see. It starts as dreams you'll have of places you've never been, people you've never met, fleeting images, feelings. Then they'll appear while you're awake. You'll be eating breakfast and suddenly recall when you last ate something similar in the 17th century. The only difficult part is that eventually it can be hard to differentiate between your life and all those other lives. They blend together.
It does sound confusing.
A little, yeah. And not all the memories will be good ones. It can take time to process.
How many times have you died? Can I ask that?
Well, we call it passing on, meeting the Eidolon, and it's fine. I've passed on 12 times that I can recall.
So your name isn't really Apollo?
Most recently it was Lucas. Everyone Lucas ever knew is gone, however, so these days I prefer Apollo again.
Lucas? Seems weird to think of you as a Lucas.
It was weird for him, too. Much like yourself, Lucas becoming Apollo was somewhat of a surprise.
Sounds like there's a story there. You said it becomes hard to differentiate your life from the others. How hard, exactly? It'll still be me, right?
Grace, would you say that who you are is at least in part due to your experiences?
I guess so, sure.
Well, you'll have a lot more experiences. They won't feel like someone else's either. It will feel like you did all those things. They will shape who you are now, just as they shaped Calliope and all those who came before her. The good news is, you won't get all the memories. Each time we pass on, the older memories fade.
Tell me about this Lucas. How did he become you? Or is it how you became Apollo?
Apollo had taken to surfing. He left the city without permission and roamed the coast looking for... Well, I'm not sure now. Whatever it was, he found it one night when a giant wave took him down. He was drowning, and I thought, this is finally it. But it wasn't. Lucas saw Apollo struggling and swam out to save him. He pulled us ashore, but it was too late. It took a long time to realize what happened. I didn't return to the city until years later. By then, everyone thought I was Apollo's chosen successor.
So no trial for you, huh?
It wasn't easy at first, without memories or anyone to guide me, but no, nothing like that.
Wait, what would have happened if Lucas hadn't tried to rescue you? What if no one was there when you...
When I died, then the Eidolon of Apollo's line would have ended forever, I think.
You think?
There have been stories about Eidolons that survive for a time and go wandering. That's probably all they are, though. Stories. It's not something we've had much opportunity to study, but normally death without passing on is how an idol really dies. Forever.
Wait, how is it good that old memories start to fade?
We're many thousands of years old, Grace. If all of those memories returned with perfect clarity, you'd drown in them.
Yeah, but doesn't that mean you've all forgotten so much?
Tell me, how much do you remember from when you were a small child?
Bits and pieces, I guess. Not much.
It's the same for us. The further I try to think back, the more blurry it becomes. I remember the important bits, but little else. Some of the really old memories. There's so many mortal stories that get mixed up with them, things my previous selves learned as legends. It becomes hard to tell. It takes time, Grace. You'll remember all the lives you've led, but at a pace you can handle, and nothing more.
It's a lot to consider. Assuming I'll even have time to worry about it, what with the trial coming.
Hopefully this eases whatever concerns you might have had. Anything else you'd like to discuss while you're here?
Tell me more about Calliope. You and her were good friends, right?
For centuries, we were far more. I was the god of the arts, and the muses were my constant companions. We went everywhere together. They had many names, but the three most common were Clio, Thalia, and Calliope. The Sisters of Beauty, I called them, though they weren't always women.
I never thought of that. Do idols change gender a lot?
Most of us seek out inheritors who are like us, I suppose, but not all. Calliope, in fact, was a man in her previous incarnation. Christoph, I think his name was. A poet Calliope adored. I was surprised when she made him a muse.
Who did Calliope become after that poet, Christoph?
You have to realize we're already into the period where Calliope and I weren't really speaking. She showed up one day in her new form, the one you met. An opera singer whose name she never revealed. We fought, as I recall. I told her she couldn't pass on every time she met an artist she fell in love with. Eventually, she'd forget everything about who we were and where we came from. She said she'd rather forget than wallow in old memories like I or the other idols were doing. It was time to wake up and make the best of our situation. Calliope was an idealist without compromise. Always. She hated what we'd become. What I'd become. She wasn't wrong.
From how you describe it, you and Calliope fought a lot.
As often as we saw each other, which became less and less as time wore on. However, she fought with everyone. Calliope hated the idols being kept secret. She and Athena would get into screaming matches over the rules, and it got so I could no longer protect her. She moved out of Olympus years ago and kept to herself. I just assumed she was wrapped up with some new artist when I got the news.
Do you regret not making up with her?
Every day I think about our last conversation and what I should have said or done differently. The problem with immortality is that you think you have all the time in the world.
It wasn't only fighting with Calliope, right? Surely there were good things too.
Is that how it sounds? No. She was marvelous. A force to be reckoned with if there ever was one. In the darkest days during the war, it was her songs that gave us hope. She kept Aphrodite alive through sheer determination, I think. Calliope cared. About us, about art, about people she'd only just met. It was her greatest strength as well as her greatest weakness.
I wonder why she picked me. I don't feel like I'm any of those things.
You underestimate yourself, Grace. I see a lot of her in you. She chose well.
What happened to the other muses? You mentioned 2 others. Were they lost in the war?
Cleo perished centuries before, the victim of an obsessed writer she'd spurned. He kept her in a cage as his personal muse.
Ugh, that's pretty dark.
It was. By the time we found her, she was already... Well, it's enough to say her captor didn't survive her for long. Talia, however, was lost to us on the very last day of the war. We were about to leave on the ship, but she just never showed up.
Do you know what happened to her?
We never found out. I worried for years, even hired people to look, but as far as I can tell, she up and vanished into smoke that day. The war had ground her down. I was upset, but not surprised.
I'd like to know a little more about the idols. I am one now, right?
You are. What would you like to know?
Well, what are we? Where did we come from? If an idol is a soul that moves from person to person, it must have started somewhere, right?
The short answer is, we don't know. If I think far enough back, I can remember bits and pieces. I remember my first Pythian games, the day the idols split in 2 over Troy, the day my first son died. But before that, nothing. None of us do. I vaguely recall the very first Apollo many thousands of years ago, but was he the original? Did he appear out of the ether? I couldn't tell you.
Psst. Isn't it strange to not know where you come from? For all you know, the idols could be aliens.
Interesting. The notion that there might be some other place far away where we're the norm is comforting. Sadly, our memories are filled with blanks. There was a war with beings we called the Titans. A terrible conflict where half our number died, yet do I remember a single battle. The last was after Rome fell. Zeus called us together to relay the news, told us to prepare for battle. And then, in the blink of an eye, I was in the 16th century. What made us forget 1,000 years? What happened during that time? We don't know. Athena calls that period the gap.
The gap you mentioned. What was that like? Did you just wake up one day, or...
I know I was alive. I passed on my eidolon who knows how many times, yet the moment I woke up, as you call it, all memory of that period was gone. It was Athena who found us. I was in France, I think. She came to my farm, and the moment I laid eyes on her, I just knew. It all came back. Did someone do that to us? Did we scatter to the winds for 1,000 years on purpose? It's a mystery.
What about Athena? I mean, she's the one who found you, right? She must have been aware.
Athena claims she awoke on her own and spent the next century locating the other idols. We've pieced together very little of the gap or of our origins. We simply live with it. Gods we may be, but I'm afraid we don't have all the answers.
Earlier you mentioned your son dying. Did I hear that right? Can idols have children?
It was rare, but yes. Back in ancient times, some of them even became idols themselves.
Some of the idols are actually family, then.
Not anymore. Most of our children met terrible ends. A gift of the fates, perhaps. I don't know. The ones who weren't idols. It's hard, watching your children grow old and die. Never understanding why they can't have the same immortality you do, why you can't grant it to them. My first son is why I'm not permitted in Hades any longer. Let's simply say that most idols have stopped having children, and maybe leave it at that.
Tell me more about the war. It seems to have had a huge effect on all of you.
I don't think we would have left the old world otherwise. It was home.
From Aphrodite's song, I know Ares betrayed everyone. What did you do?
I caused it. I foresaw what was going to happen, so I tried to prevent it. I told Ares. I figured if the god of war couldn't stop what was to come, then...
And that's why he betrayed everyone.
He decided the idols were a lost cause. Because I told him we were.
Surely it could have happened anyhow. It was a big war. The biggest.
Perhaps. We'll never know, will we? My time afterwards was spent helping the survivors, keeping us on the move. If Hephaestus hadn't intervened, we would have all been captured.
And he's...
Oh, gone now, we assume, like so many others. We are nothing more than refugees from a war long over, Grace.
I'd like to know a little more about you. All I know is you live in a dump, you have an oracle, and you...
I'm not sure what to tell you. One day has bled into the next for so long, I feel like I've been lost in the spaces in between.
Wow, that's a bit dramatic.
Yeah, well, it comes naturally. Music and the arts were once under my purview as a god.
How did that get decided? Did you have a big hat full of pieces of paper and you all picked at random?
No, we chose them for ourselves. Some, at least. Others were given to us by our priests. We collected godly responsibilities like marbles.
People collect marbles?
Oh, or whatever it is mortals collect these days. Cars, perhaps? The point is, we took our godly duties very seriously.
You must have been very different back when you were a proper god.
I think most of us were. We saw ourselves as, I don't know, teachers. Mortals were our students, and we guided them to enlightenment. We thought we were special, infallible. I was as magnificent as the sun, and I surrounded myself with those who basked in my radiance.
That doesn't sound like you.
Yeah. I was arrogant. If there was a man or woman I desired, then I had to have them, or there would be consequences. You wouldn't have liked me. I wouldn't have liked me.
Was it hard for the idols to come to the New World? It's just a place like any other, isn't it?
I don't think it was the place so much as the condition we were in. Shell-shocked, one might say. Our entire world had been turned upside down. Suddenly, we had rules. Secrecy was paramount, and no one was permitted to leave the city. Some, like my sister Artemis, couldn't abide it.
Yeah, I've heard the name.
Goddess of the hunt. And a wild thing herself. She left, I think. Faded away without a word. As many did in the early days here. Later, Athena became even more strict. For our own good, of course, but it hasn't been easy. This city has never felt like home so much as a temporary shelter.
So what is Persephone's beef with you exactly? Is it just about what Hades did to her?
That's no small thing.
It seems more personal than that.
I mentioned how Persephone's kidnapping almost meant war between Olympus and Hades, yes? Well, while this was all going on, Persephone managed to escape the underworld, and I'm the one she encountered first.
Uh-oh.
Hades was hot on her heels, and I had a choice. Either do battle with Hades and start the war right then and there, or let him take her back. Zeus would have had my head if I had sparked a war. Yet all I still think of are Persephone's eyes as Hades smugly took back his prisoner. It's not my finest moment.
Apollo, have you ever tried, I don't know, talking to someone about how you feel?
I will never understand this modern fascination with therapy and focusing on one's feelings.
It might help. You never know.
Yes, I've tried it. There was one I used to speak to. Hecate enchanted him never to reveal what I told him. I don't know that unburdening myself to the man helped. He wasn't exactly trained for this sort of problem.
It is kind of hard to relate to a god, sure.
I do appreciate the thought. But I'm afraid muddling through is as good as it gets for us.
That's all I can think of for now. I'll see you around.
Of course. I look forward to it.